Alexander Whitmore stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below like scattered diamonds. Tomorrow was his 18th birthday, and instead of excitement, a heavy weight pressed against his chest. The marble floors beneath his feet were cold, matching the emptiness that had become his constant companion. His phone buzzed with another message from his father's assistant. "Mr. Whitmore Sr. sends his regrets. The Tokyo merger requires his immediate attention. Your birthday celebration has been postponed indefinitely." Alexander deleted the message without responding. It was the third time this year his father had canceled their plans. The massive apartment felt more like a museum than a home. Everything was perfect, expensive, and untouchable. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting prismatic rainbows across walls lined with priceless artwork. Yet Alexander would have traded it all for a single genuine conversation with someone who cared about him. Not his bank account. Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper, appeared in the doorway with her usual kind smile. She had been more of a parent to him than his actual father ever was. "Master Alexander, shall I prepare dinner for you?" "Just something simple, Mrs. Chen. I'm not very hungry." He turned away from the window, his reflection showing a young man with everything money could buy but nothing his heart truly wanted. "Your father called earlier. He wanted me to arrange a party for tomorrow. Should I start making preparations?" Mrs. Chen's voice held a gentleness that reminded Alexander of the mother he barely remembered. Alexander shook his head. "Who would I invite? The kids at school only care about what I can give them. They see dollar signs when they look at me, not a friend." His voice carried a sadness that money couldn't cure. The private school he attended was filled with other wealthy children, but their friendships felt hollow. They competed over who had the latest gadgets, the most expensive cars, the biggest trust funds. When Alexander tried to connect with them on a deeper level, they looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language. "Perhaps you could invite some classmates anyway. Sometimes people surprise us," Mrs. Chen suggested, though even she seemed doubtful. "I sent out invitations last week. 3 people responded, and 2 of them asked if they could bring friends to network with my family contacts." Alexander laughed bitterly. The third person wanted to know if there would be expensive party favors they could take home. Mrs. Chen's expression softened with understanding. She had watched this lonely boy grow up surrounded by wealth but starved for genuine affection. His father was always traveling, always busy, always promising to spend time together next week or after this deal closes. Alexander walked to his bedroom, passing family photos where his father's smile looked more like a business negotiation than parental love. In his room, everything was organized perfectly by a team of staff. His clothes were arranged by color and season, his books alphabetized, his desk cleared of any personal items that might suggest he actually lived there. He pulled out his laptop and opened social media, watching other teenagers post pictures of birthday preparations, friends decorating, families baking cakes, people genuinely excited to celebrate together. The contrast with his own life felt like a knife to his heart. At school, Alexander had tried joining clubs and sports teams, hoping to find connection through shared interests. But even there, his wealth created a barrier. Teammates assumed he didn't need encouragement because he had everything. Teachers gave him special treatment, not because of his efforts, but because of donations his father made to the school. The loneliness had become so familiar, it felt like an old friend. Alexander had learned to smile at social events, to make small talk about vacations and possessions, to play the role of the fortunate rich kid. But behind the mask, he yearned for someone who would choose his company simply because they enjoyed being around him. He remembered his 8th birthday, the last time his father had actually attended his party. Even then, business calls interrupted every conversation. Alexander had blown out the candles on a cake that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Surrounded by hired entertainers and children whose parents encouraged them to be nice to the Whitmore boy. As he prepared for bed, Alexander made a decision that surprised even him. Tomorrow, instead of wallowing in his penthouse prison, he would venture into the city, not to some exclusive restaurant or private club, but to places where real people lived real lives. Maybe he would find something money couldn't buy. Mrs. Chen knocked softly on his door. "Master Alexander, I've prepared your favorite soup. It might help you sleep better." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. You're the only one who remembers what I actually like." He meant it. In a world where people constantly tried to impress him with extravagant gestures, her simple kindness stood out like a beacon. Your happiness matters more than all the wealth in the world, she said, her eyes twinkling with the wisdom of someone who had seen both poverty and plenty. As Alexander settled into his silk sheets, he stared at the ceiling and made a silent wish, not for more money or possessions, but for one genuine human connection, someone who would see Alexander the person, not Alexander the heir to millions, someone who would celebrate with him because they wanted to, not because they expected something in return. The city noise hummed softly through his windows. Millions of people living their lives, probably many of them happier than he was despite having far less. Tomorrow would be different, he promised himself. Tomorrow he would step outside his golden cage and see what the world had to offer beyond the cold comfort of his inherited fortune. Outside his window, the city slept, unaware that one of its wealthiest residents was also one of its loneliest. But sometimes the universe has a way of surprising us when we least expect it, and for Alexander Whitmore that surprise was just hours away, in the form of two small girls who would change everything he thought he knew about friendship, generosity, and what it truly meant to celebrate life. Alexander woke on his birthday morning to the sound of Mrs. Chen preparing breakfast in the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through his bedroom windows, but the golden rays did little to warm the chill in his heart. 18 years old today, and he felt more alone than ever. He dressed simply, choosing jeans and a plain t-shirt instead of his usual expensive designer clothes. Today he wanted to blend in with regular people, to experience life outside his privileged bubble. Mrs. Chen noticed his casual attire but said nothing, simply handing him a small wrapped package. "Happy birthday, dear boy," she said with genuine warmth. Inside was a simple leather bracelet with a small compass charm, so you can always find your way back home. The gift meant more to him than any of the expensive watches or gadgets he usually received. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen, this is perfect." After breakfast, Alexander made an unusual decision. Instead of taking his chauffeur-driven car, he walked to the nearby subway station. The underground world fascinated him. People rushing to work, street musicians playing for tips, vendors selling hot dogs and newspapers. This was life without filters, without the polished veneer of wealth. He emerged from the subway in a middle-class neighborhood he had never visited before. The streets were lined with small shops, family restaurants, and modest apartment buildings. Children played in small parks while their parents watched from benches. Everything felt more real, more alive than his sterile world of marble and gold. As he walked, Alexander noticed two young girls sitting on the steps of an old apartment building. They appeared to be twins, maybe 10 years old, with identical faces but different expressions. One girl clutched a worn stuffed rabbit while the other held a small notebook, writing carefully with a stubby pencil. Their clothes were clean but obviously second-hand, patched in places with different colored fabric. Their shoes were scuffed and their hair was pulled back in simple ponytails with rubber bands instead of fancy hair accessories. Yet despite their modest appearance, both girls had bright, intelligent eyes and warm smiles. Alexander found himself slowing his pace, curious about these children who seemed so content despite having so little. He had never seen kids their age without expensive toys, designer clothes, or the latest electronic devices. These girls seemed genuinely happy with just each other's company and their simple possessions. The girl with the notebook looked up and noticed him watching. Instead of the calculating look he was used to from children who recognized his wealth, she simply smiled and waved. Her sister looked up too, and both girls seemed completely unimpressed by his presence in either a positive or negative way. They saw just another person walking down their street. Alexander realized he was staring and felt embarrassed. He started to walk away, but something made him stop. Maybe it was their genuine smiles. Or maybe it was the fact that they treated him like a normal person. He found himself walking back toward their building. "Hi," he said awkwardly, not sure how to start a conversation with children who didn't know he was rich. "I'm Alexander. I was just walking around the neighborhood." "I'm Emma," said the girl with the notebook. "And this is my sister, Lily." The girl with the stuffed rabbit gave a shy wave but didn't speak. "What are you writing?" Alexander asked, genuinely curious. Emma's face lit up. "I'm writing stories. This one is about a magical garden where vegetables grow into houses for tiny people. Lily draws the pictures." She showed him a page covered in neat handwriting and small detailed drawings. Alexander was amazed by their creativity. The story was imaginative and well written, far better than anything he had ever attempted. This is really good. You're both very talented. Thank you, Emma beamed. Lily is the artist. I'm better with words. Together we make a good team. Lily finally spoke, her voice soft but clear. Emma says we could write books someday, real ones that people would buy in stores. The simplicity of their dream touched Alexander's heart. These girls had big ambitions despite their circumstances, while he, with every advantage in the world, had never really dreamed of anything beyond inheriting his father's business. Today is actually my birthday, Alexander found himself saying, though he wasn't sure why he shared that information. Both girls' eyes widened with excitement. Happy birthday, they said in unison. Emma looked thoughtful for a moment. Are you having a party? Alexander hesitated. The honest answer was that he had no one to celebrate with, but admitting that felt too pathetic. Not really. Maybe just a quiet dinner. That sounds lonely, Lily said with surprising insight for someone so young. Birthdays should have cake and singing and games. And friends, Emma added. The most important part is having friends to celebrate with. Alexander felt a tightness in his chest. These two little girls had identified the exact thing missing from his life: genuine friendship. What would you do for your birthday? He asked. Emma and Lily exchanged glances. Well, Emma said slowly, we share a birthday in 2 months. We usually save up our allowance money to buy ingredients for a small cake. Then we invite the other kids from our building to share it with us in the courtyard. It's not fancy, Lily added, but everyone has fun. Mrs. Rodriguez always brings her guitar, and Mr. Kim tells funny stories. Alexander was struck by how their celebration sounded infinitely better than any party he had ever attended. That sounds perfect, he said honestly. Emma looked at her sister and some kind of silent communication passed between them. Finally, Emma spoke up, her voice hesitant but hopeful. Alexander, we know we just met you, but if you don't have anyone to celebrate with today. She paused, gathering courage. Could we come too? We don't have much money for a present, but we could bring some cookies our neighbor taught us how to make, and Lily could draw you a birthday card. The simple offer hit Alexander like a thunderbolt. These two girls, who had nothing, were offering to share what little they had with a complete stranger. They were inviting themselves to celebrate with him, not because of what he could give them, but because they believed no one should be alone on their birthday. For the first time in years, Alexander felt genuinely moved. These children had more generosity in their small hearts than most adults he knew. They were offering him the one thing his money couldn't buy: genuine companionship. I would love that more than anything, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I have a better idea. What if we celebrated together, all three of us? I know a nice place where we could go. Both girls lit up with excitement, but Emma looked worried. We don't have fancy clothes for a nice restaurant. You're perfect exactly as you are, Alexander assured them. And I promise, wherever we go, we'll have the best birthday celebration ever. As they stood up to leave with him, Alexander realized his birthday had already become more meaningful than any he could remember. These two remarkable little girls had given him something precious, the gift of being seen as simply Alexander, not as a bank account with legs. Today, for the first time, he might actually have a happy birthday. Alexander walked between Emma and Lily as they headed down the busy street, their excited chatter filling a silence he hadn't realized was so heavy in his life. The twins peppered him with questions about his favorite color, his favorite food, and whether he liked dogs or cats better. Their genuine curiosity about him as a person, not his possessions, felt like sunshine after years of cold rain. Blue. Pizza, and I like both dogs and cats, he answered, smiling at how simple their questions were. No one had asked him about his preferences in years. Most people assumed they already knew everything important about him based on his family name. Emma clapped her hands together. Blue is my favorite color too. And Lily loves pizza more than anything in the world. Lily nodded enthusiastically. Our mom makes pizza sometimes with whatever we have in the refrigerator. Last time she used crackers instead of dough because we didn't have flour. It was actually pretty good. The mention of their mother made Alexander curious. Where is your mom today? She's at work, Emma explained. She cleans offices at night and sleeps during the day, so we try to be quiet in the mornings. She works really hard to take care of us. Alexander felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. These girls spoke about their mother with such love and pride, despite their difficult circumstances. He couldn't remember the last time he had spoken about his father with genuine warmth. "What about your dad?" Lily asked innocently. Alexander hesitated. How could he explain that his father was one of the richest men in the city, but couldn't find time for a simple birthday dinner? "He's always traveling for work. I don't see him much." Both girls looked at him with sympathy that seemed far too mature for their age. "That must be really hard," Emma said softly. "Even when we don't have much money, we always have each other and Mom. Family isn't about having a lot of things. It's about having people who love you." Her words hit Alexander like a gentle slap of truth. These children understood something about family and love that he was still learning, despite being 8 years older. As they walked, Alexander noticed how the twins interacted with their neighborhood. They waved to shop owners, pet dogs walking with their owners, and helped an elderly woman carry her groceries up the steps to her building. Everyone seemed to know and like them. They were rich in ways that had nothing to do with money. "Where are we going for your birthday celebration?" Emma asked, bouncing slightly as she walked. Alexander had been thinking about that exact question. His first instinct was to take them to an expensive restaurant, but something told him that wasn't what would make this day special. These girls had taught him more about joy in the past hour than he had learned in years of luxury. "Actually, I was hoping you could show me your favorite place in the neighborhood," he said. "Somewhere that makes you happy." Emma and Lily exchanged excited looks. "Oh, we know the perfect place," Lily exclaimed, her shyness disappearing in her enthusiasm. They led him through several streets to a small park tucked between apartment buildings. It wasn't much, just a few trees, some benches, a small playground, and a fountain that looked like it had seen better days. But to the twins, it was clearly a magical place. "This is where we come to write stories and draw," Emma explained, leading him to their favorite bench. "The fountain makes nice sounds and we can watch people walking their dogs. Sometimes we pretend we're characters in our own stories, having adventures." Alexander looked around the modest park and saw it through their eyes. It was peaceful, comfortable, and full of possibilities for imagination. "It's perfect," he said, and meant it. "But wait," Lily said suddenly, looking worried. "We promised to bring cookies, but we don't have any with us. And we didn't make you a birthday card yet." Alexander was about to tell them not to worry about it, but Emma was already pulling her notebook and pencil from her pocket. "We can make one right now. Lily can draw, and I'll write a poem." The twins set to work with intense concentration. Lily carefully tore out a clean page and began sketching a birthday cake with detailed decorations. Emma chewed on her pencil thoughtfully before writing in her neat handwriting. Alexander watched them work, amazed by their dedication to making his birthday special. In his world, gifts were expensive but impersonal, chosen by assistants or purchased online without thought. These girls were creating something unique just for him, using nothing but their talents and time. "What kind of cake do you like?" Lily asked, looking up from her drawing. "I honestly don't know," Alexander admitted. "I usually get whatever the caterer thinks is appropriate." Both girls stared at him in confusion. "You don't get to choose your own birthday cake?" Emma asked, clearly shocked by this concept. "Not really. Someone else always handles those details." Lily and Emma exchanged one of their silent twin communications again. Then Emma made an announcement that surprised Alexander completely. "We're going to make you a real birthday cake. Not today, because we need to shop for ingredients, but soon. And you get to choose exactly what kind you want. What flavor, what color frosting, everything. And we'll put real candles on it that you get to blow out while making a wish," Lily added. "That's the most important part of any birthday." Alexander felt his throat get tight with emotion. These two little girls were offering to spend their own money they clearly didn't have much of, to give him an experience he had never actually had. A birthday cake chosen with love instead of duty. "You don't have to do that," he said quietly. "You've already given me the best birthday present I've ever received." "What present?" Emma asked, confused. "We haven't given you anything yet." Alexander smiled, feeling something warm and unfamiliar spreading through his chest. "You invited me to be your friend. You're celebrating with me just because you wanted to, not because you expected anything back. That's the most valuable gift anyone has ever given me." Both girls beamed at him with such pure happiness that Alexander felt like his heart might burst. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to have friends who cared about him as a person. Emma finished her poem, and Lily completed her drawing. They presented their handmade birthday card with shy pride. The poem was about friendship being the greatest treasure, and the drawing showed 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. As Alexander held their simple, heartfelt gift, he realized that this modest park bench was where his real life was beginning. Everything before this moment had been just preparation for learning what it meant to be genuinely cared for by people who wanted nothing from him except his friendship. "Thank you," he said, carefully folding the card to keep it safe. "This is the most beautiful birthday card I've ever received." The afternoon was still young, and Alexander knew this was just the beginning of the most important birthday of his life. As the afternoon sun grew warmer, Alexander found himself genuinely laughing for what felt like the first time in months. Emma and Lily had convinced him to play a game they called Story Tag, where each person had to add 1 sentence to an adventure tale before passing it to the next player. Their imaginations were boundless, creating wild stories about flying elephants, talking trees, and brave mice who saved entire kingdoms. "Your turn, Alexander," Emma giggled. "The mouse knight is trapped in the tower." Alexander thought for a moment, then continued their tale. But just when all hope seemed lost, the mouse remembered he had learned to speak the language of spiders, and whispered to a friendly spider to help him escape. Both girls clapped with delight at his addition to their story. "That's so smart," Lily exclaimed. "You're really good at this." The simple praise warmed Alexander's heart more than any business achievement ever had. These girls appreciated his creativity, not his bank account. They saw qualities in him that he had forgotten he possessed. Their storytelling was interrupted when Alexander's stomach rumbled loudly. He realized they had been playing for hours and none of them had eaten lunch. "Are you girls hungry?" he asked. Emma and Lily exchanged glances. "A little," Emma admitted, "but we usually wait until Mom gets home for dinner." Alexander could tell they were probably hungrier than they were letting on, but didn't want to seem greedy or demanding. Their consideration for others, even when they were in need themselves, impressed him deeply. "It's my birthday," he said with a grin, "and I decree that all birthday celebrations must include ice cream. Do you know anywhere around here that sells good ice cream?" Both girls' faces lit up like Christmas morning. "Mr. Giuseppe has the best ice cream cart in the whole neighborhood," Lily said excitedly. "But it's kind of expensive." "Today that doesn't matter," Alexander assured them. "Today is about celebrating friendship." They found Mr. Giuseppe's colorful ice cream cart parked near the fountain. The elderly Italian man had a warm smile and greeted Emma and Lily like old friends. "Ah, my favorite little storytellers," he called out in his thick accent. "How are you today, my dears?" "It's our friend Alexander's birthday," Emma announced proudly. "We're celebrating together." Mr. Giuseppe looked at Alexander with twinkling eyes. "Birthday boy, eh? Then you must have the special birthday sundae. I make it only for very special occasions." Alexander started to protest that he didn't need anything elaborate. But Mr. Giuseppe was already at work, scooping generous portions of several flavors into a large bowl. He added whipped cream, cherries, sprinkles, and even a small sparkler candle on top. "For the birthday boy," he announced with a flourish. "And for my favorite customers," he added, handing Emma and Lily each a cone with 2 scoops of their favorite flavors. Alexander reached for his wallet, but Emma tugged on his sleeve. "Wait," she whispered. "We want to pay for our own ice cream. Mom gave us each $2 for emergencies, and this feels like a special enough emergency." The gesture nearly brought tears to Alexander's eyes. These girls wanted to contribute to their shared celebration, even though their emergency money was probably all they had. He watched as they carefully counted out their crumpled dollar bills and handful of coins. "Mr. Giuseppe," Alexander said quietly, "could you put their ice cream on my bill too? But maybe don't tell them directly?" The kind ice cream vendor understood immediately. "Of course, girls, your money is just enough today," he said with a wink at Alexander. "Must be your lucky day." As they sat on a nearby bench eating their ice cream, Alexander learned more about the twins' lives. They told him about their school, where they were both excellent students despite having to study by candlelight sometimes when the electricity was turned off. They talked about their dreams of becoming writers and artists and how they helped their mother by keeping the apartment clean and making simple meals. "Don't you ever wish things were different?" Alexander asked gently. "That you had more money or bigger apartments or fancy toys?" Emma considered this seriously. "Sometimes I wish Mom didn't have to work so hard," she said. But we have everything we really need. We have each other. We have books from the library. We have friends in our building, and we have our dreams. What else is there? Lily nodded in agreement. Rich people on TV always look sad to me, she observed with startling insight. They have big houses, but they eat dinner alone. They have expensive cars, but no one to talk to while they drive. I think being lonely must be the worst kind of poor there is. Her words hit Alexander like a lightning bolt. This 10-year-old girl had just described his entire life with uncomfortable accuracy. He had been the loneliest kind of poor without even realizing it. You're very wise, Lily, he said softly. Both of you are. You've taught me more in one afternoon than I learned in years of expensive schools. As the sun began to set, Alexander felt a sadness creeping in. This magical day would have to end eventually. The twins would go home to their small apartment and he would return to his empty penthouse. The thought of going back to his isolated existence felt unbearable, now that he knew what real friendship could be like. Emma seemed to sense his mood shifting. Alexander, are you okay? You look sad. He forced a smile. I'm just thinking about how different my life is going to be after today. You two have changed everything for me. Good different or bad different? Lily asked with concern. Good different, Alexander assured them. The best kind of different. You've shown me what I've been missing. Emma stood up suddenly, her face bright with inspiration. Then we need to make a pact. A friendship pact that means we'll always be friends no matter what. How do we do that? Alexander asked, charmed by her enthusiasm. Emma pulled out her notebook and tore out 3 small pieces of paper. We each write down our most important wish for our friendship. Then we trade papers and keep each other's wishes. That way we'll always remember what's important. They each wrote carefully, thinking hard about their words. When they finished, they folded their papers and exchanged them solemnly. Alexander opened the paper Emma had given him. In her neat handwriting, she had written, I wish for Alexander to never feel lonely again, because everyone deserves to have people who care about them. The paper from Lily read, I wish for all 3 of us to always remember that the best treasures can't be bought in stores. They live in people's hearts. Alexander looked at his new friends, these 2 remarkable girls who had given him the most precious gift imaginable, the knowledge that he was worthy of love just for being himself. As they prepared to head home, he knew this was not an ending, but the beginning of the most important chapter of his life. The wealthy heir who had woken up empty and alone that morning was gone forever, replaced by someone who finally understood the true meaning of richness. The next morning, Alexander woke up with a feeling he had never experienced before, genuine excitement about the day ahead. For the first time in years, he had plans that didn't involve business meetings, expensive restaurants, or empty social obligations. He had promised Emma and Lily that he would return to their neighborhood, and he couldn't wait to see his new friends again. Mrs. Chen noticed the change in him immediately. You look different today, Master Alexander, she observed as she prepared his breakfast. Happier. I made 2 new friends yesterday, Alexander said, unable to keep the smile off his face. Real friends. They want to spend time with me just because they like me, not because of what I can give them. Mrs. Chen's face lit up with joy. She had watched Alexander grow up lonely and isolated, and seeing him finally experience genuine friendship filled her heart with happiness. Tell me about these special friends, she said, sitting down to listen. Alexander told her everything about meeting the twins, about their creativity and kindness, about how they had invited themselves to his empty birthday and made it the best day of his life. Mrs. Chen listened with tears in her eyes, recognizing that something fundamental had shifted in the young man she had helped raise. They sound like remarkable children, she said when he finished. What will you do today? Alexander had been thinking about that exact question. They mentioned wanting to buy ingredients to bake me a real birthday cake. I want to help, but I don't want to make them feel bad about not having much money. How do I help without hurting their pride? Mrs. Chen smiled with the wisdom of someone who understood both poverty and pride. Perhaps you could suggest shopping together and offer to contribute as their friend, not as someone doing charity. Make it about sharing the experience, not about the money. Alexander nodded, understanding her meaning. These girls had already taught him that the most valuable gifts came from the heart, not the wallet. He needed to find a way to contribute that honored their dignity and their desire to give to him. He dressed in his simple clothes again and took the subway back to their neighborhood, The familiar sights and sounds that had seemed so foreign just 2 days ago now felt welcoming. He was beginning to understand that home wasn't about marble floors and crystal chandeliers. It was about being in places where people cared about you. He found Emma and Lily, exactly where he expected, sitting on their apartment building steps, Emma writing in her notebook while Lily sketched in the margins. When they saw him approaching, their faces broke into huge smiles that made Alexander's heart feel light. "Alexander," Emma called out, jumping up to greet him. "We've been planning your birthday cake all morning." Lily held up a piece of paper covered with drawings of different cake designs. "We can't decide between chocolate with vanilla frosting or vanilla with chocolate frosting. Which do you think?" Alexander pretended to consider this very seriously. "Those are both excellent choices. But what if we made both? A 2-layer cake with chocolate and vanilla?" Both girls gasped with excitement at this suggestion. "That's the most amazing idea ever," Emma exclaimed. "But," her face fell slightly, "that might cost more than we can afford." Alexander sat down on the steps beside them. "What if we all pitched in together? I could contribute some money. You could contribute your baking skills and creativity, and we could all contribute the work. It would be a team effort." The twins considered this proposal carefully. Alexander held his breath, hoping he had framed it in a way that felt like partnership rather than charity. "That seems fair," Emma finally decided. "We do know how to bake really well. Our neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez taught us, and you would be helping with ingredients. So it's like we're all bringing something important to the project. Plus," Lily added with practical wisdom, "if we're going to be real friends, we should learn to work together on things. That's what friends do." They walked to the neighborhood grocery store, a small family-owned market that was nothing like the upscale shops Alexander usually frequented. The aisles were narrow, the produce wasn't perfectly arranged, and the selection was limited. But it had something his usual stores lacked: warmth and community. Emma and Lily knew everyone in the store. They introduced Alexander to Mrs. Patterson, the elderly owner, who immediately adopted him into her circle of favorite customers. "Any friend of these sweet girls is a friend of mine," she declared, pinching his cheek affectionately. The twins approached their shopping with the careful consideration of people who understood the value of every dollar. They compared prices, chose generic brands when the quality was the same, and planned every purchase. Alexander watched in fascination, learning more about smart shopping in 1 hour than he had ever known. "We need eggs, flour, sugar, butter, baking powder, vanilla, and cocoa powder," Emma read from her carefully written list. "And candles. We can't forget candles." As they gathered ingredients, Alexander noticed Lily lingering near a display of colorful frosting decorations, little flowers and stars that would make any cake look festive. She picked up a small container, looked at the price, and put it back with a small sigh. When the twins weren't looking, Alexander quietly added the decorations to their cart, along with some other special touches he thought would make their cake extra special. At the checkout, he insisted on paying, framing it as his contribution to their team project. Back at their apartment building, the twins led Alexander up 3 flights of narrow stairs to their home. He had been curious about where they lived, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of their small, spotless apartment. The entire space was smaller than Alexander's bedroom, but it was filled with love and creativity. Books from the library were stacked neatly on shelves made from boards and bricks. Art supplies were organized in recycled containers. A small table served as both dining room and homework space. Everything was clean, organized, and cared for despite being old and worn. "Mom's still sleeping," Emma whispered, pointing to a closed door. "She worked an extra shift last night, so we need to be quiet." The twins moved around their tiny kitchen with practiced efficiency, gathering mixing bowls, measuring cups, and wooden spoons. Alexander watched in amazement as they transformed their small space into a bakery, every movement coordinated and purposeful. "First, we make the chocolate layer," Lily explained in a whisper, carefully measuring flour into a bowl. "Mrs. Rodriguez taught us to always measure twice to make sure it's exactly right." Emma cracked eggs with the skill of someone much older, separating the whites from the yolks with perfect precision. "The secret to good cake," she whispered, "is mixing everything in the right order and not rushing any step." Alexander had never baked anything in his life. In his world, Cakes appeared magically from expensive bakeries, perfect and impersonal. But here, in this tiny kitchen, he was learning that the best cakes were made with patience, care, and love. "Can you help me mix this?" Lily asked, handing him a wooden spoon. "You have to stir in a figure-8 pattern, not just circles. It makes the batter lighter." As Alexander followed her instructions, he realized he was learning more than just baking techniques. He was learning about attention to detail, about taking pride in your work, and about how much more meaningful things became when you created them yourself. The apartment filled with the warm smell of baking cake, and Alexander felt a contentment he had never experienced in his luxurious penthouse. This small, humble space felt more like home than anywhere he had ever lived. While the cakes baked, Emma showed Alexander her collection of stories written in various notebooks and loose papers. Each tale was imaginative and well-crafted, showing a level of creativity that impressed him deeply. Lily's artwork decorated the margins, detailed drawings that brought Emma's words to life. "Have you ever thought about publishing these?" Alexander asked, genuinely amazed by their talent. Emma laughed. "We're just kids. Nobody would want to read stories by 10-year-olds. "I disagree," Alexander said firmly. "These are better than many books I've read. You have real talent, both of you." The timer dinged softly, and they carefully removed their cakes from the old oven. Both layers had risen perfectly, filling the tiny kitchen with an even more wonderful aroma. As they cooled, the twins prepared frosting from scratch, teaching Alexander how to whip butter and powdered sugar into silky smoothness. "Now comes the fun part," Emma declared as they began assembling the cake. Decorating. They worked together to create the most beautiful cake Alexander had ever seen. Not because it was professionally perfect, it was slightly lopsided and the frosting had a few fingerprints, but because it was made with love and friendship. Every imperfection made it more precious. Lily carefully arranged the colorful decorations Alexander had secretly added to their cart, creating patterns of flowers and stars across the surface. Emma wrote "Happy Birthday, Alexander" in careful script with chocolate frosting. When they finished, they stepped back to admire their creation with immense pride. "It's perfect," Alexander said, and meant it completely. This homemade cake, created in a tiny kitchen by two loving friends, was more beautiful than any expensive dessert he had ever received. They placed 18 candles on the cake, some straight, some slightly tilted, all glowing warmly in the dim apartment light. Emma and Lily sang "Happy Burr." 3 weeks had passed since Alexander's life-changing birthday, and everything had transformed in ways he never could have imagined. He found himself spending every free moment in Emma and Lily's neighborhood, discovering a world that existed parallel to his own privileged life but felt infinitely more real and meaningful. The twins had introduced him to their community, a tight-knit group of families who looked out for each other despite having very little money. Alexander met Mrs. Rodriguez, who taught guitar lessons in exchange for help with her grocery shopping. He met Mr. Kim, the building superintendent, who fixed everyone's problems and told the most amazing stories about his childhood in Korea. He met dozens of children who accepted him immediately, once Emma and Lily vouched for him. But the most significant introduction had been to the twins' mother, Maria Santos. Alexander had been nervous about meeting her, worried she might be suspicious of a wealthy teenager befriending her daughters. Instead, Maria had welcomed him with the same warmth and generosity that seemed to run in their family. "Any friend of my girls is family to me," she had said, pulling him into a hug that felt more maternal than any embrace he had received from his own distant father. "They haven't stopped talking about you since your birthday. You've made them very happy." Maria worked 3 different jobs, cleaning offices at night, stocking shelves at a grocery store in the early morning, and taking care of elderly Mrs. Patterson's apartment in the afternoons. Despite her exhausting schedule, she always had time to listen to her daughters' stories, help with their homework, and make sure they felt loved and secure. Alexander found himself fascinated by this woman, who managed to be everything a parent should be, despite having none of the resources his father possessed. She attended every school event, celebrated every small achievement, and somehow always made Emma and Lily feel like they were the most important people in her world. "How do you do it?" Alexander asked her one evening as they sat on the building's front steps, while the twins played with other neighborhood children. "How do you work so much and still have energy for everything else?" Maria smiled tiredly but with genuine contentment. Love gives you strength you didn't know you had. When you care about someone more than yourself, you find ways to do impossible things. My girls are my whole world. Everything I do is so they can have better futures than I had. Alexander thought about his own father, who had every advantage and resource imaginable, but couldn't find time for a simple dinner conversation. The contrast was both illuminating and heartbreaking. As the weeks passed, Alexander began to see his own privileged world through new eyes. The expensive restaurants felt cold and impersonal after sharing simple meals in the Santos family's tiny kitchen. His designer clothes seemed ridiculous compared to Emma and Lily's practical, well-cared-for outfits. His enormous bedroom felt empty and lonely after spending afternoons in the twins' cozy shared space, where they created art and told stories and laughed until their stomachs hurt. But the biggest change was in Alexander himself. For the first time in his life, he had a purpose beyond inheriting his father's business empire. Emma and Lily had shown him their dreams of becoming published authors and artists, and Alexander had become determined to help make those dreams come true, not by throwing money at the problem, but by using his resources thoughtfully and respectfully. He started researching children's book publishers, art schools, and writing contests. He learned about literary agents and illustration programs. Most importantly, he began to understand how he could use his privileged position to open doors for talented people who deserved opportunities but lacked connections. "I've been thinking," Alexander said one afternoon as he, Emma, and Lily worked on their latest story collaboration in the park. "What if we tried to get your stories published? I mean really published in actual books." Emma looked up from her notebook, eyes wide with surprise. "Do you really think someone would want to publish our stories?" "I know they would," Alexander said confidently. "You two are incredibly talented. The problem is that publishing can be hard to break into without the right connections. But I might be able to help with that part." Lily frowned thoughtfully. "We want to succeed because we're good at what we do, not because we know someone important." That wouldn't feel right. Alexander had expected this response. It was exactly the kind of integrity he had come to associate with the twins. "That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying I could help you get your work in front of the right people, but after that your talent would have to speak for itself. I can open doors, but you would have to walk through them on your own merit." Emma and Lily exchanged one of their silent twin conversations. Finally, Emma spoke up. "Could we think about it? This is a big decision and we'd want to talk to Mom first." "Of course," Alexander assured them. "There's no rush. I just wanted you to know that I believe in you and I want to help however I can." That evening, Alexander returned to his penthouse feeling more energized and purposeful than ever before. But as he walked through the marble hallways and past the expensive artwork, he felt a growing disconnect from this world that no longer seemed to fit who he was becoming. Mrs. Chen noticed his thoughtful mood as she served his dinner. "You seem to be doing a lot of thinking lately, Master Alexander. I've been wondering if there's a way to live differently," he said slowly. "I've seen how much happier people can be with less money, but more meaningful relationships. I don't want to live in isolation anymore, surrounded by beautiful things but no real connections." Mrs. Chen sat down across from him, something she rarely did. "What would you change if you could?" Alexander had been asking himself that same question. "I want to find a way to use what I have to help people, really help them, not just write checks to charities I never visit. I want to be part of a community instead of living above it. I want to earn people's respect and friendship, not just inherit their deference to my bank account." "Those are worthy goals," Mrs. Chen said gently. "But change like that requires courage. Are you ready to live differently than you were raised to live?" Alexander thought about Emma and Lily, about their mother Maria who worked 3 jobs with a smile, about a community that took care of each other without expecting anything in return. Then he thought about his father, alone in another hotel room in another city, surrounded by luxury but isolated from any genuine human connection. "Yes," Alexander said with quiet certainty, "I'm ready to learn how to be rich in the ways that actually matter." As he prepared for bed that night, Alexander felt a sense of anticipation about the future that he had never experienced before. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just waiting for his inheritance. He was actively planning how to build a meaningful life, guided by the wisdom of 2 remarkable 10-year-old girls who had taught him that the most valuable treasures couldn't be bought or inherited. but had to be earned through love, friendship, and genuine care for others. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to live up to the example Emma and Lily had set for him. And for the first time, Alexander couldn't wait to see what kind of person he could become. 6 months after that life-changing birthday, Alexander stood in front of a room full of children, parents, and community members, his heart pounding with nervous excitement. Today was the official opening of the Santos Community Arts Center, a project that had grown from a simple desire to help Emma and Lily share their talents into something much larger and more meaningful. The old, abandoned warehouse had been transformed into a bright, welcoming space filled with art supplies, musical instruments, computers for writing, and comfortable reading nooks. But more than the physical transformation, Alexander had undergone his own metamorphosis in the process of creating this center. When I first met Emma and Lily Santos, Alexander began his speech, his voice stronger than he had expected. I thought I was the one doing them a favor by offering friendship. I had no idea that these two remarkable girls would teach me everything I needed to know about what makes life worth living. In the front row, Emma and Lily beamed up at him with proud smiles, their mother Maria sitting between them with tears of joy in her eyes. Behind them sat dozens of neighbors who had become Alexander's extended family over the past months. Mrs. Rodriguez with her guitar, Mr. Kim with his endless stories, Mrs. Patterson from the grocery store, and children of all ages who had welcomed Alexander into their community. This center isn't a gift from me to you, Alexander continued, speaking from his heart rather than from the speech he had prepared. It's a celebration of what happens when people share their talents and support each other's dreams. Every person in this room contributed something to make this place possible. It was true. While Alexander had provided the funding to purchase and renovate the building, the community had provided everything that made it special. Mrs. Rodriguez had organized music classes. Mr. Kim had taught woodworking. Maria Santos had coordinated after-school tutoring programs. Parents had volunteered their time to paint murals, organize supplies, and create the warm, welcoming atmosphere that made the center feel like home. Alexander had learned to be not just a donor, but a participant. He had painted walls alongside 8-year-olds, learned to tune guitars from Mrs. Rodriguez, and discovered that his expensive business education had actually taught him useful skills for organizing community programs. For the first time in his life, he felt truly useful. The most important thing I've learned, Alexander said, looking directly at Emma and Lily, is that the best way to celebrate your own good fortune is to help others discover their own talents and pursue their own dreams. That's what real wealth looks like. Emma stood up suddenly, unable to contain her excitement any longer. Can we show everyone the surprise now? She called out, causing the entire audience to laugh with affection. Alexander grinned. I think that's a wonderful idea. Emma and Lily hurried to the front of the room, carrying a wrapped package between them. We have something for Alexander, Emma announced proudly. Something to thank him for believing in us and for teaching us that dreams can come true if you have good friends to help you. They handed him the package, and Alexander unwrapped it carefully, his hands slightly shaking with emotion. Inside was a beautiful hardbound book titled The Adventures of Alexander and the Dream Twins, with stunning cover art that could only have come from Lily's talented hands. We wrote a story about our friendship, Lily explained, her usual shyness replaced by confident pride, about how a lonely boy and 2 poor girls found each other and discovered that the best treasures are the ones you share with people you love. Alexander opened the book and saw that it was professionally printed and bound, with Emma's imaginative stories complemented by Lily's detailed illustrations throughout. On the dedication page, written in both girls' handwriting, were the words, "For Alexander, who taught us that real princes don't live in castles, they live in the hearts of their friends." How did you? Alexander began, then stopped as he saw the knowing smiles on Maria's face and Mrs. Chen's face in the audience. You're not the only one with connections, Emma said with a mischievous grin. Mrs. Chen helped us contact that publisher you told us about. They loved our story so much they want us to write more books, and Lily's going to illustrate all of them. Alexander felt tears running down his cheeks, but for the first time in his life they were tears of pure joy. These 2 incredible girls had not only achieved their dream of becoming published authors, they had done it by writing about the friendship that had saved him from a life of loneliness and emptiness. There's more, Lily added, practically bouncing with excitement. The publisher wants to donate copies of our book to libraries and schools all over the city. Our story is going to help other kids learn about friendship and community. As the celebration continued around them, Alexander found himself thinking about how dramatically his life had changed. His father, who had finally returned from his extended business trip, had been initially skeptical about Alexander's new interests. But when he saw the genuine happiness in his son's eyes and the respect he had earned from an entire community, even the elder Whitmore had begun to understand that his son was discovering something more valuable than business success. "You've grown up," his father had said during their first real conversation in years. "You've become the kind of man I always hoped you would be, but never knew how to teach you to become." Now, surrounded by friends who valued him for his character rather than his inheritance, Alexander understood what Emma had meant when she said that being lonely was the worst kind of poor. He had been wealthy in money but poverty-stricken in everything that actually mattered. Emma and Lily had shown him how to be rich in the ways that counted. Rich in friendship, rich in purpose, rich in the joy that comes from helping others achieve their dreams. As the evening wound down and families began heading home, Alexander found himself sitting on the front steps of the community center with Emma, Lily, and Maria. The same kind of comfortable togetherness they had shared on that first day, but now multiplied by months of shared experiences and deepened friendship. "Are you happy, Alexander?" Emma asked, leaning against his shoulder in the casual way of someone who knew she was loved. Alexander looked around at the building that buzzed with creative energy, at the friends who had become his chosen family, at the two remarkable girls who had changed everything by simply asking if they could come to his empty birthday party. "I'm more than happy," he said, meaning it completely. "I'm home." As the city lights twinkled around them, Alexander realized that his real life had begun the day two poor twin girls taught a wealthy heir that the richest treasures couldn't be inherited. They had to be shared. And every day since then had been the most valuable kind of wealthy he could imagine. Wealthy in love, wealthy in friendship, and wealthy in the knowledge that he finally knew what it meant to live a truly rich life. The boy who had once had everything but felt empty had become a young man who understood that having people to share your joys with was the only wealth that really mattered. And thanks to Emma and Lily Santos, he would never be poor in the ways that counted ever again.